This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. From the North American Review, Chapters from My Autobiography, Chapter 24, by Mark Twain. From Susie's Biography of Me, 1885-86. Mama and Papa have returned from Onteora, and they have had a delightful visit. Mr. Frank Stockton was down in Virginia, and could not reach Onteora in time, so they did not see him, and Mrs. Mary Mapes Dodge was ill and couldn't go to Onteora, but Mrs. General Custer was there, and Mama said that she was a very attractive, sweet-appearing woman. Dictated October 9th, 1906. Onteora was situated high up in the Catskill Mountains in the center of a far-reaching solitude. I do not mean that the region was wholly uninhabited. There were farmhouses here and there at generous distances apart. Their occupants were descendants of ancestors who had built the houses in Rip Van Winkle's time or earlier, and those ancestors were not more primitive than were this posterity of theirs. The city people were as foreign and unfamiliar and strange to them as monkeys would have been, and they would have respected the monkeys as much as they respected these elegant summer resorters. The resorters were a puzzle to them. Their ways were so strange and their interests so trivial. They drove the resorters over the mountain roads and listened in shamed surprise at their bursts of enthusiasm over the scenery. The farmers had had that scenery on exhibition from their mountain roosts all their lives, and had never noticed anything remarkable about it. By way of an incident, a pair of these primitives were overheard chatting about the resorters one day, and in the course of their talk this remark was dropped. "I was a-driving a passel of them around 'bout yesterday evening, quiet ones, you know, still and solemn, and all to once they busted out to make your hair lift, and I judged hell was to pay. Now what do you reckon it was? Warn't anything but just one of them common damned yaller sunsets." In those days. Tuesday, October 16th, 1906. Warner is gone. Stockton is gone. I attended both funerals. Warner was a near neighbor from the autumn of '71 until his death 19 years afterward. It is not the privilege of the most of us to have many intimate friends. A dozen is our aggregate. But I think he could count his by the score. It is seldom that a man is so beloved by both sexes and all ages as Warner was. There was a charm about his spirit and his ways and his words that won all that came within the sphere of its influence. Our children adopted him while they were little creatures, and thenceforth to the end he was Cousin Charlie to them. He was Uncle Charlie to the children of more than one other friend. Mrs. Clemens was very fond of him, and he always called her by her first name, shortened. Warner died, as she died, and as I would die, without premonition, without a moment's warning. Uncle Remus still lives, and must be over 1,000 years old. Indeed, I know that this must be so, because I have seen a new photograph of him in the public prints within the last month or so, and in that picture his aspects are distinctly and strikingly geological, and one can see he is thinking about the mastodons and the plesiosaurians that he used to play with when he was young. It is just a quarter of a century since I have seen Uncle Remus. He visited us in our home in Hartford, and was reverently devoured by the big eyes of Susie and Clara, for I made a deep and awful impression upon the little creatures, who knew his book by heart through my nightly declamations of its tales to them. By revealing to them privately that he was the real Uncle Remus, whitewashed so that he could come into people's houses the front way. He was the bashfulest grown person I have ever met. When there were people about he stayed silent and seemed to suffer until they were gone. But he was lovely, nevertheless, for the sweetness and benignity of the immortal Remus looked out from his eyes, and the graces and sincerities of his character shone in his face. It may be that Jim Wolfe was as bashful as Harris. It hardly seems possible. Yet as I look back 56 years and consider Jim Wolfe, I am almost persuaded that he was. He was our long, slim apprentice in my brother's printing office in Hannibal. He was 17, and yet he was as much as 4 times as bashful as I was, though I was only 14. He boarded and slept in the house, but he was always tongue-tied in the presence of my sister, and when even my gentle mother spoke to him he could not answer save in frightened monosyllables. He would not enter a room where a girl was. Nothing could persuade him to do such a thing. Once, when he was in our small parlor alone, two majestic old maids entered and seated themselves in such a way that Jim could not escape without passing by them. He would as soon have thought of passing by one of Harris's plesiosaurians 90 feet long. I came in presently, was charmed with the situation, and sat down in a corner to watch Jim suffer and enjoy it. My mother followed a minute later and sat down with the visitors and began to talk. Jim sat upright in his chair, and during a quarter of an hour he did not change his position by a shade. Neither General Grant nor a bronze image could have maintained that immovable pose more successfully. I mean as to body and limbs. With the face there was a difference. By fleeting revealments of the face I saw that something was happening, something out of the common. There would be a sudden twitch of the muscles of the face, an instant distortion, which in the next instant had passed and left no trace. These twitches gradually grew in frequency, but no muscle outside of the face lost any of its rigidity or betrayed any interest in what was happening to Jim. I mean, if something was happening to him, and I knew perfectly well that that was the case. At last a pair of tears began to swim slowly down his cheeks amongst the twitchings, but Jim sat still and let them run. Then I saw his right hand steal along his thigh until halfway to his knee, then take a vigorous grip upon the cloth. That was a wasp that he was grabbing. A colony of them were climbing up his legs and prospecting around, and every time he winced they stabbed him to the hilt. So for a quarter of an hour one group of excursionists after another climbed up Jim's legs and resented even the slightest wince or squirm that he indulged himself with in his misery. When the entertainment had become nearly unbearable he conceived the idea of gripping them between his fingers and putting them out of commission. He succeeded with many of them, but at great cost, for as he couldn't see the wasp, he was as likely to take hold of the wrong end of him as he was the right. Then the dying wasp gave him a punch to remember the incident by. If those ladies had stayed all day, and if all the wasps in Missouri had come and climbed up Jim's legs, nobody there would ever have known it but Jim and the wasps and me. There he would have sat until the ladies left. When they finally went away, we went upstairs and he took his clothes off, and his legs were a picture to look at. They looked as if they were mailed over with shirt buttons, each with a single red hole in the center. The pain was intolerable. No, would have been intolerable, but the pain of the presence of those ladies had been so much harder to bear that the pain of the wasp's stings was quite pleasant and enjoyable by comparison. Jim never could enjoy wasps. I remember once, from Susy's Biography of Me, 1885, 6. Mama has given me a very pleasant little newspaper scrap about Papa to copy. I will put it in here. Thursday, October 11th, 1906. It was a rather strong compliment. I think I will leave it out. It was from James Redpath. The chief ingredients of Redpath's make-up were honesty, sincerity, kindliness, and pluck. He wasn't afraid. He was one of Osawatomie Brown's right-hand men in the bleeding Kansas days. He was all through that struggle. He carried his life in his hands, and from one day to another it wasn't worth the price of a night's lodging. He had a small body of daring men under him, and they were constantly being hunted by the jayhawkers, who were pro-slavery Missourians, guerrillas, modern freelances. Friday, October 12th, 1906. I can't think of the name of that daredevil guerrilla who led the jayhawkers and chased Redpath up and down the country, and in turn was chased by Redpath. By grace of the chances of war, the two men never met in the field, though they several times came within an ace of it. 10 or 12 years later, Redpath was earning his living in Boston as chief of the lecture business in the United States. 15 or 16 years after his canvas adventures, I became a public lecturer, and he was my agent. Along there somewhere was a press dinner one November night at the Tremont Hotel in Boston, and I attended it. I sat near the head of the table with Redpath between me and the chairman. A stranger sat on my other side. I tried several times to talk with the stranger, but he seemed to be out of words, and I presently ceased from troubling him. He was manifestly a very shy man, and, moreover, he might have been losing sleep the night before. The first man called up was Redpath. At the mention of the name the stranger started and showed interest. He fixed a fascinated eye on Redpath and lost not a word of his speech. Redpath told some stirring incidents of his career in Kansas, and said, among other things, "3 times I came near capturing the gallant Jayhawker chief, and once he actually captured me, but didn't know me, and let me go, because he said he was hot on Redpath's trail and couldn't afford to waste time and rope on inconsequential small fry." My stranger was called up next, and when Redpath heard his name he in turn showed a startled interest. The stranger said, bending a caressing glance upon Redpath and speaking gently, I may even say sweetly, "You realize that I was that Jayhawker chief. I am glad to know you now, and take you to my heart and call you friend." Then he added in a voice that was pathetic with regret, "But if I had only known you then, what tumultuous happiness I should have had in your society while it lasted." The last quarter of a century of my life has been pretty constantly and faithfully devoted to the study of the human race. That is to say, the study of myself, for in my individual person I am the entire human race compacted together. I have found that there is no ingredient of the race which I do not possess in either a small way or a large way. When it is small, as compared with the same ingredient in somebody else, there is still enough of it for all the purposes of examination. In my contacts with the species, I find no one who possesses a quality which I do not possess. The shades of difference between other people and me serve to make variety and prevent monotony, but that is all. Broadly speaking, we are all alike, and so by studying myself carefully, and comparing myself with other people, and noting the divergences, I have been enabled to acquire a knowledge of the human race which I perceive is more accurate and more comprehensive than that which has been acquired and revealed by any other member of our species. As a result, my private and concealed opinion of myself is not of a complimentary sort. It follows that my estimate of the human race is the duplicate of my estimate of myself. I am not proposing to discuss all of the peculiarities of the human race at this time. I only wish to touch lightly upon 1 or 2 of them. To begin with, I wonder why a man should prefer a good billiard table to a poor one, and why he should prefer straight cues to crooked ones, and why he should prefer round balls to chipped ones, and why he should prefer a level table to one that slants, and why he should prefer responsive cushions to the dull and unresponsive ones. I wonder at these things, because when we examine the matter we find that the essentials involved in billiards are as completely and exhaustively furnished by a bad billiard outfit as they are by the best one. One of the essentials is amusement. Very well, if there is any more amusement to be gotten out of the one outfit than out of the other, the facts are in favor of the bad outfit. The bad outfit will always furnish 30% more fun for the players and for the spectators than will the good outfit. Another essential of the game is that the outfit shall give the players full opportunity to exercise their best skill and display it in a way to compel the admiration of the spectators. Very well, the bad outfit is nothing behind the good one in this regard. It is a difficult matter to estimate correctly the eccentricities of chipped balls and a slanting table, and make the right allowance for them and secure a count. The finest kind of skill is required to accomplish the satisfactory result. Another essential of the game is that it shall add to the interest of the game by furnishing opportunities to bet. Very well, in this regard no good outfit can claim any advantage over a bad one. I know by experience that a bad outfit is as valuable as the best one, that an outfit that couldn't be sold at auction for $7 is just as valuable for all the essentials of the game as an outfit that is worth $1,000. I acquired some of this learning in Jackass Gulch, California, more than 40 years ago. Jackass Gulch had once been a rich and thriving surface mining camp. By and by its gold deposits were exhausted. Then the people began to go away, and the town began to decay, and rapidly. In my time it had disappeared. Where the bank and the city hall and the church and the gambling dens and the newspaper office and the streets of brick blocks had been, was nothing now but a wide and beautiful expanse of green grass, a peaceful and charming solitude. Half a dozen scattered dwellings were still inhabited, and there was still one saloon of a ruined and rickety character struggling for life, but doomed. In its bar was a billiard outfit that was the counterpart of the one in my father-in-law's garret. The balls were chipped, the cloth was darned and patched, the table's surface was undulating, and the cues were headless and had the curve of a parenthesis. but the forlorn remnant of marooned miners played games there, and those games were more entertaining to look at than a circus and a grand opera combined. Nothing but a quite extraordinary skill could score a carom on that table, a skill that required the nicest estimate of force, distance, and how much to allow for the various slants of the table and the other formidable peculiarities and idiosyncrasies furnished by the contradictions of the outfit. Last winter, here in New York, I saw Hopp and Schaefer and Sutton and the 3 or 4 other billiard champions of world-wide fame contend against each other, and certainly the art and science displayed were a wonder to see. Yet I saw nothing there in a way of science and art that was more wonderful than shots which I had seen Texas Tom make on the wavy surface of that poor old wreck in the perishing saloon at Jackass Gulch 40 years before. Once I saw Texas Tom make a string of 7 points on a single inning, all calculated shots, and not a fluke or a scratch among them. I often saw him make runs of 4, but when he made his great string of 7 the boys went wild with enthusiasm and admiration. The joy and the noise exceeded that which the great gathering at Madison Square produced when Sutton scored 500 points at the 18-inch game on a world-famous night last winter. With practice, that champion could score 19 or 20 on the Jackass Gulch table, but to start with, Texas Tom would show him miracles that would astonish him. Also, it might have another handsome result. It might persuade the great experts to discard their own trifling game and bring the Jackass Gulch outfit here and exhibit their skill in a game worth 100 of the discarded one, for profound and breathless interest and for displays of almost superhuman skill. In my experience, games played with a fiendish outfit furnish ecstasies of delight which games played with the other kind cannot match. 27 years ago my budding little family spent the summer at Bateman's Point near Newport, Rhode Island. It was a comfortable boarding place, well stocked with sweet mothers and little children, but the male sex was scarce. However, there was another young fellow besides myself, and he and I had good times. Higgins was his name, but that was not his fault. He was a very pleasant and companionable person. On the premises there was what had once been a bowling alley. It was a single alley, and it was estimated that it had been out of repair for 60 years, but not the balls. The balls were in good condition. There were 41 of them, and they ranged in size from a grapefruit up to a lignum vitae sphere that you could hardly lift. Higgins and I played on that alley day after day. At first one of us located himself at the bottom end to set up the pins in case anything should happen to them, but nothing happened. The surface of that alley consisted of a rolling stretch of elevations and depressions, and neither of us could, by any art known to us, persuade a ball to stay on the alley until it should accomplish something. Little balls and big, the same thing always happened. The ball left the alley before it was halfway home, and went thundering down alongside of it the rest of the way, and made the gamekeeper climb out and take care of himself. No matter, we persevered, and were rewarded. We examined the alley, noted and located a lot of its peculiarities, and little by little we learned how to deliver a ball in such a way that it would travel home and knock down a pin or two. By and by we succeeded in improving our game to a point where we were able to get all of the pins with 35 balls. So we made it a 35-ball game. If the player did not succeed with 35, he had lost the game. I suppose that all of the balls taken together weighed 500 pounds, or maybe a ton, or along there somewhere, but anyway it was hot weather, and by the time that a player had sent 35 of them home he was in a drench of perspiration and physically exhausted. Next we started cocked hat, that is to say a triangle of 3 pins, the other 7 being discarded. In this game we used the 3 smallest balls and kept on delivering them until we got the 3 pins down. After a day or two of practice we were able to get the chief pin with an output of 4 balls, but it cost us a great many deliveries to get the other 2. But by and by we succeeded in perfecting our art, at least we perfected it to our limit. We reached a scientific excellence where we could get the 3 pins down with 12 deliveries of the 3 small balls, making 36 shots to conquer the cocked hat. Having reached our limit for daylight work, we set up a couple of candles and played at night. As the alley was 50 or 60 feet long, we couldn't see the pins, but the candles indicated their locality. We continued this game until we were able to knock down the invisible pins with 36 shots. Having now reached the limit of the candle game, we changed and played it left-handed. We continued the left-handed game until we conquered its limit, which was 54 shots. Sometimes we sent down a succession of 15 balls without getting anything at all. We easily got out of that old alley 5 times the fun that anybody could have gotten out of the best alley in New York. One blazing hot day a modest and courteous officer of the regular army appeared in our den and introduced himself. He was about 35 years old, well built and militarily erect and straight, and he was hermetically sealed up in the uniform of that ignorant old day, a uniform made of heavy material and much properer for January than July. When he saw the venerable alley, and glanced from that to the long procession of shining balls in the trough, his eye lit with desire, and we judged that he was our meat. We politely invited him to take a hand, and he could not conceal his gratitude, though his breeding and the etiquette of his profession made him try. We explained the game to him, and said that there were 41 balls, and that the player was privileged to extend his inning and keep on playing until he had used them all up, repeatedly, and that for every 10 strike he got a prize. We didn't name the prize. It wasn't necessary, as no prize would ever be needed or called for. He started a sarcastic smile, but quenched it, according to the etiquette of his profession. He merely regarded that he would like to select a couple of medium balls and one small one, adding that he didn't think he would need the rest. Then he began, and he was an astonished man. He couldn't get a ball to stay on the alley. When he had fired about 15 balls and hadn't yet reached the cluster of pins, his annoyance began to show out through his clothes. He wouldn't let it show in his face, but after another 15 balls he was not able to control his face. He didn't utter a word, but he exuded mute blasphemy from every pore. He asked permission to take off his coat, which was granted, and then he turned himself loose, with bitter determination, and although he was only an infantry officer, he could have been mistaken for a battery, he got up such a volleying thunder with those balls. Presently he removed his cravat. After a little he took off his vest, and still he went bravely on. Higgins was suffocating. My condition was the same, but it would not be courteous to laugh. It would be better to burst, and we came near it. That officer was good pluck. He stood to his work without uttering a word, and kept the balls going until he had expended the outfit 4 times, making 4 times 41 shots. Then he had to give it up, and he did, for he was no longer able to stand without wobbling. He put on his clothes, bade us a courteous good-bye, invited us to call at the fort, and started away. Then he came back and said, "What is the prize for the 10 strike?" We had to confess that we had not selected it yet. He said, gravely, that he thought there was no occasion for hurry about it. I believe Bateman's Alley was a better one than any other in America, in the matter of the essentials of the game. It compelled skill, it provided opportunity for bets, and if you could get a stranger to do the bowling for you, there was more and wholesomer and delightfuller entertainment to be gotten out of his industries than out of the finest game by the best expert and played upon the best alley elsewhere in existence. Mark Twain, to be continued.